How's it going YouTube? Come back today with another video, and today guys what the bring to you is going to be the Yu-Gi-Oh! Meta tier list right now with the Blue Eye structure deck coming out. I did slim down on some of the decks that we're going to talk about today just because there's always going to be so many, and I feel like a lot of them aren't even that great to talk about at the moment, especially things like Purely and Marincess, just decks that are realistically not doing anything at the moment. But we are going to be talking about the mainstays in the format and the decks that are going to be really good, the decks that have a chance, and the ones that I just wouldn't play. But if you haven't already checked out my sponsors over on Imperium Duels, Gem, Cloud, RIW, Grimoire, or Arla, definitely go ahead and do so all down below in the description. But without further ado, let's hop right into the tier list. The first one I want to talk about today is going to be Melodious. This is a mainstay tier 2 pick for me. I think this is always going to be something that you can pick up and play and do pretty well with. I like this deck a lot. You can play cards like Purge and Orange Light, which is really nice. I like Melodious. I think this deck will always end up being a competitor. Tier 2 decks are something that don't have the greatest chance at doing extremely well, but they have a very consistent chance of doing well. And they're still going to be lesser than the better picks, but they're not bad to pick from. I think that's one thing that a lot of people just kind of see. They're like, oh, it's tier 2, I'm not going to even try to play that. But a lot of times, if you have a good pilot at tier 2, that deck can be very scary. The next one here is Centurion, and honestly, this one's more of a don't than anything. I'm just not really trying to play this deck into something like Ryzeal. Ryzeal is currently 50% of the meta, and trying to play this deck into Chain Detonator, right? Like, you're gonna have a bad time. The amount of Ryzeal that you run into at these big tournaments is way too much to even try to be playing something like Centurion. Maybe you find the secret sauce to playing a deck like this, you're maining like triple ulti slayer or what have you, but this is not the deck that I would pick moving forward. Again, these are my choices. Definitely let me know down below in the comment section what you would choose, but this is not a deck that I would bring with me to an event right now. Now for pure Kashtira, I think this is definitely going to be like a rogue to tier 2 deck. It's somewhere in between the two. I think that the deck itself is really strong. I think that it plays around the fact that Bestials are everywhere right now. You have Birth, you have Shifter. If you're really strong with the deck, I feel like you'll do pretty well. But otherwise, you should probably just be on like Kashtira Fiendsmith. I think this deck is really good. This is one of those things where you kind of have to trim down a lot on certain aspects of the deck. So like either you play a lot of Fiendsmith cards in like a minimal Kashtira package or vice versa. But I really don't feel like this is even a deck that you could play like the equal package of both and then play non-engine. You kind of have to pick and choose what side of the deck you want to lean harder into. And I feel like even just playing a more Kashtira heavy deck with a few Fiendsmith cards will end up doing a lot better for you, especially because of all the Bestials in the format. It just gives you an additional push for game and an additional push for a larger board. The next one up here is going to end up being Chimera as a Mina. This deck is still going to be very strong right now. It's something where Droll is shaping up to be pretty popular in the format, so is Shifter, so it is really hard to play a deck like this right now, but it's still going to be something where if you run into it, you should know what these cards do, and you should respect the fact that it's going to be a deck that you could see. Very similarly, though, we do have the White Forest as a Mina deck. Now, this is like top of tier 2, bottom of tier 1.5. We're seeing it get a lot more popular right now, and I think the deck itself could be even better post the new set of Alliance Insight. It just won Tulsa as well, but I think that this deck in particular needs a lot more fine-tuning, and it really needs a lot more work to become a better deck. I think that it has a potential to move up, but as of right now, we're still at like the beginning stages of like testing with the deck and figuring out what it really can do, what the ratios need to be, what's the correct package to play with it. So I think that the Asmina White Forest deck has a ton of potential, and it's probably something that you should look into picking up right now because nothing in it is like too expensive. I know that some things can get a little pricey, but it's not super bad right now. So if you're looking for a pretty solid resource looping mid-rangey deck, this is the one for you. Lab is just gonna be Rogue. I feel like this is one of those decks, and I've said this 100 times, but if you're really strong with a Rogue deck, you can probably win a regional and do really well at a YCS. But Lab hasn't really been anything more than Rogue in a while. It's one of those decks that really does take a good pilot. It's similar to Striker, where like, if you don't know what you're doing with Lab, you'll lose every single round. So you have to be really on top of your tech choices and know if you need to be running like the Shifter build, the Furnisher build, if you need to be running like simultaneous equation cannon. There's so many different ways you can run Lab, which makes it so unique. but it's also going to take a lot of skill to be able to pilot this for an entire tournament. Voices is going to be sitting right next to it. This is a deck that just hasn't really been performing. I don't think anyone's really shocked by this. It'll end up doing well at some point in the future, I'm sure, but right now it's just Rogue. Same with Shark. I know a lot of people are just like, oh my god, you have to play Shark. This deck is crazy. And they are getting 7th Tachyon, so they get like another card they can play within the deck as well. But the deck auto-folds to D-Barrier, the deck auto-folds to Droll. There's so many situations where this deck just auto-loses. Now, if the deck's able to just go off, then sure. But if you're going to be playing this water deck, why are you not just playing this water deck, right? Like, this deck has become so good, and a lot of the pilots of water have become even better with the deck, and there's been a lot more theory. And this is where I could see the White Forest deck end up going, because of the fact that, like, once you really know what the deck does and you know how to play around the really unique scenarios, the deck becomes a lot better, the ratios become a lot better, and the deck itself becomes a lot more scary. We've seen a ton of Mermail. The deck, when it goes first, is kind of crazy, and that's one thing where you want to make sure that you are prepared for that. And if you're going to be going to an event, why would you play an uphill battle playing a deck like this, where you could just be playing the better of the two water decks? Yubel, I really want to put it in, like, Rogue. It's like bottom of tier 2, which is crazy, because the reverse on the hits on the opening to the Phantom, and now being under so many Charmies that hits every aspect of this deck, no matter which Charmy you use, it's really rough to play Yubel. Alongside shifters everywhere and multiple Bestials right now in the format. It is really, really difficult for me to tell anyone to play Yubel. It is just not that good at the moment. Tenpai, it's up at 1.5. I don't think anyone's really surprised about this either. You just see it in the mid-rounds of an event, and it's something that can really knock you. It's not very good to play against still, just because it does what it does. It just kind of breaks the board, and you sometimes just lose, but it's going to be in the room. It's something that you will end up seeing, whether it's the Striker variant or just like the straight up Breaker variant or others. You will see Tenpai at some point in a tournament. Make sure that you are ready for it and know that it's still very strong. Goblin Biker, it's just tier 2, like middle of tier 2. The deck itself can get some respect on it just because of the fact that it's been doing pretty okay. But it's still one of those decks that I wouldn't recommend to anyone. I'm not going to tell someone to go out of their way and pick up Goblin Biker. I don't think that it's that good. I think that it's pretty cool and it can perform, but it won't perform or be pretty cool as opposed to like anything else in tier 2. I think anything has an equal opportunity in this category. I think that these two decks are a little bit better, but as far as this goes, I don't really think that any of these are going to perform better than any one of them. Each one, you can have your own best day at a tournament and just do insane. So that's, again, with tier 2. Like, sometimes it's just your day, and sometimes it's a tier 2 deck. Now, as for the Fiendsmith Primite Bestial deck, it's just going to be top of tier 2. Same with Blue Eyes. It's going to be somewhere next to this. I think that wherever these decks are in the tier list will end up being together. I think that Blue Eyes just is not that good. I know a lot of people are hyping it up, and a lot of people are like, it's Blue Eyes, and it's going to do okay. Look at the OCG. But, like, the OCG is nowhere close to an accurate representation. The OCG has Baron. The OCG has Appaloosa. The OCG has a ton of things that we do not have. I also understand that a lot of people are like, well, you know, we have a lot of support, and the deck will do pretty okay. I genuinely do not think that Blue Eyes is that good at all. I do not think the deck will end up doing that great, and the only way that we'll end up seeing tops out of this deck is the sheer number of players who will be playing it once we get the structure decks, which will kind of just force it into top cut. And that's something that will happen, but that doesn't make the deck any better. Now, as for the 3 Ryzeal decks, I feel like the Pure variant and the Fiendsmith variant are both tier 0 categories right now. I think that Mitsurugi is going to be pretty high-end in tier 1. I think that it has a lot more outs than the other two. And the increased amount of Bestials, Drolls, Shifters, I know the deck plays a little bit better through Shifter, but still, I think that it has a lot harder time than the other two at the moment. The deck still performs, it still does very well, it's still very tier 1, but I think that the Pure variant and the Fiendsmith variant are both going to do a bit better than just that. Now, as for Pure Malice, and then we have the Fiendsmith Malice, I didn't include Bestial Malice because in my opinion, that's still just Pure Malice to a point. Unless you're playing like Lubellions, then it's a little different, but Lubellion's not even that common, it's just a lot of Bestials. I do think, though, that the Fiendsmith variant is a little worse than the actual variant, because the Pure variant is playing Bystials, Impulses, Nibiru's, Shifters, the cards that are just game ending, and cards that make things very difficult for your opponent. I think that playing the Fiendsmith cards is really cool because it gives you options through Lancia. If they draw phase Lancia you and you can start using your Fiendsmith cards, you can't get Bystial, which is hilarious in my opinion. But at the same time, this is not going to be as strong as just playing the pure variant because I feel like you focus harder on winning that game 1. So if you don't get Lancia'd game 2 or 3, hopefully you're not getting Lancia'd in the other one and you're able to just win. So for the next two here, we have the Vanquish Soul deck, and that deck actually just got top 8 at a regional, which is really cool. The list was interesting, main decking things like Muals because it's an Earth is pretty cool. But definitely just Rogue. It's a deck that'll pop up here and there. I would not play Ritual Beast right now. I know a lot of people are like, that deck is still okay, but like it loses to every Charmy and Lancia. It's really bad right now. Do not play that deck. I do not recommend that deck. Crystron is going to be like middle of tier 2. It's okay. I feel like the deck still needs a lot more fine-tuning to really get anywhere. The deck itself can be really strong, but it also can be really weak, and we haven't seen that many results out of it, so I'm still very hesitant to put it any higher. Mimighoul is definitely just keeps seeing play, which is kind of crazy. This is another thing where it just kind of sneaks in every single time, and it's very interesting to see, but it'll be in tier 2. The Exodia deck, too, I mean, this is also just around. It's doing pretty well. It did pretty well at the YCS as well. I want to put it in Rogue, but I mean, like, it's still one of those decks that I feel like has potential to top. And if it has potential to top, I have to put it a little higher. Memento is just going to be tier 1. I think that deck is really obnoxious and something that you will be playing against. It is in the top 5 decks in the game right now. I do feel like that takes a very high level pilot, but the deck itself is going to be very rewarding if you spend a lot of time really understanding what the deck can do. I definitely just have to put Fire King in Rogue, maybe like top of Rogue. I really do think that it was cool that it performed over the weekend, but I think this is a case of like, if you understand your deck and you really know what the deck does and how the deck does it, you're going to do very well. I think that if other people try to pick this deck up and they try to perform the same way that it was performed at the YCS, I don't think that you'll get the same result. And for me, if a deck can't just naturally get the best result just by being the deck it is and just being carried by the deck, then I just don't think that I can put it any higher. I do think that it's really cool to see it, though. I think that was really cool. The Winamet is the Abyss Shrine and the Alcanics. And I think that's really cool that we got to see those two decks play against each other in top 4. But overall, this is where I'm at right now with the format. I do hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, let me know down in the comments below, because I know this is definitely one of those things where a lot of people are going to have varying opinions, but it's definitely something that I think is always open for discussion, just because it's Yu-Gi-Oh! And there's so many different decks. But I'll talk to you guys all in the next video. Thanks.